Welcome to the Gearland. My name's Aaron. We're here at Justin Kennedy Guitars here in Ohio. Justin, it's good to see you.
Hello. Nice to see you.
It's been a long time,
It's
my
been a
friend.
long time.
Justin and I went to high school together, so take it at that. We won't say what year.
But we will say I was in marching band. I marched occasionally behind this guy, sometimes in front of him, depending on which direction we were going.
So you can see that Justin has been in the music industry for a long time.
I'm not going to call marching band the music industry. I feel like that's being very generous about our time in marching band.
It did feel like we were
industrious.
We were industrious. We were working very hard.
Yes.
In the middle of summer.
Oh my God, it was so hot.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that now.
Stories of band camp. Yeah. So Justin, we'll talk a little bit today and find out what's going on with you.
Awesome.
So tell me your first memory of music that you can recall,
like
in your life,
like ever. I remember like the first time something where music meant something to me was my mom got me a Beach Boys greatest hits tape, and I was obsessed with the Beach Boys forever. Like, and I think my first concert they took me to, I was 7 years old, and they took me to see the Beach Boys at Timberwolf.
I might have been at that concert. Actually, that was my first concert.
It was at Kings Island Amphitheater. Yeah. And then what's funny is if you fast forward, oh man, had to have been probably
the Cocktail album.
I couldn't tell. I was 7.
Okay,
I was unaware of who Tom Cruise was.
Kokomo was this big song then. I just remember that.
I probably was more interested in Surfing USA.
There you go.
But fast forward 30 years after that, not 30, more like 25, and I ended up teching for the Beach Boys at a local show that they did for the Reds. And I'm like, man, they still look the same way I thought they did when I was 7. I can just see them now.
So the Beach Boys was your first kind of memory of music in your life.
That really like hit home for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, go if you have anything else to say.
That's
So yeah, as we mentioned earlier, we were in high school together. And what instrument did you play in high school?
I was a very horrible trombone player.
Trombone.
I mean, painfully bad. You shouldn't give a non-fixed note instrument to a child under 15 unless they can have that, they're adept enough to hear that subtle difference between F sharp and that weird semitone between the two. And I was just an awful trombone player. But luckily, I think my parents helped me buy a bass when I was 12 or 13. Mm-hmm. And luckily with frets, it's easier to hit those same notes without any issues.
Wow. How did you decide on the baritone?
Or the trombone?
I'm sorry, trombone.
How did you decide?
I was on baritone. That's right. You were on trombone.
I think when in 5th grade, we went to high school at Madeira. In 5th grade or 4th grade, when you go and they're going to show you like what instruments do you want to do that you can do in band. I was immediately struck by how cool the trombone sounded. And what's interesting for me is you fast forward several years later, and when I started playing electric bass, I became obsessed with the sound of fretless bass, which in terms of instrumentation, I'm probably wrong. There's going to be somebody that listens to this and like, that guy is a friggin' idiot, and they're right. But the trombone and fretless bass share so much tonal characteristics. They sit in the same frequency range, the glissandos and the way that you can blend notes between them. And I think there was something in me that was always drawn to that sort of effect. Even now, I still prefer playing fretless, though with way better pitch than I ever played trombone now. So, but yeah, so there you go. So
that's good to see that, how the transition. So it wasn't pointless to be playing that instrument at that age.
I mean, like I guess it wasn't then. Or I guess you find the points for it later.
Right.
But like more than anything, I learned how to read bass clefs when I walked into my first lesson.
There you go.
It's like, oh yeah, you read bass clef already. I'm like, yeah, that's a C, that's a D, and I didn't even know that. I think probably then I wasn't even fully aware that treble clef even existed. I was just realized that the guys playing trumpet didn't read the same notes the same way I did. And
yeah.
So, but yeah.
That's pretty cool. So I remember back in high school, you used to wear a lot of the band shirts. You and John
It
Records
has not changed.
And Kent.
Yeah,
Right?
Kent is.
You guys used to wear all those a lot. What were some of the shirts that you remember having back then, and what bands had an influence on you at that time?
In fact, it's funny. I still have a bunch of these shirts saved. Like I have a box of old band shirts. These are gonna be worth something. Like these are rags, but I can't throw them away. I remember having tons of Primus shirts. The big bands for me. We were just talking about this to somebody earlier today. Big bands for me were always like Primus, Rush, Megadeth. King Crimson was a big one. Really, who else was in that would have been high school? Jamiroquai late in high school.
Yeah.
Like I really went down, really got into those guys. Who else was real big in high school for me? But Primus and Rush were always near the top of that list.
Makes sense.
Yeah, those were Primus shirts. Probably were half of my wardrobe in high school. I'm trying to think if there's any ones that stick out in my brain for like memorable that I would have had. Those are probably the ones that I remember the most. I was the most proud that I wore till they literally fell apart. And I still, like I said, I still have some of them stashed. Like my first concert was Primus and Rush on the Counterparts tour.
Yeah.
And I still have my Rush shirt that has the nut and the bolt from the Counterparts cover folded up and stashed in a box somewhere at my house because I'm a lunatic that can't throw anything away.
I mean, you have those memories. I mean, I still have that. I remember we were talking earlier, and I have this Foo Fighters shirt from their first tour, even before they came out with their first album. It's sitting there. My wife's like, "Why didn't you get rid of it?" I'm like, "No."
That really is probably a collector's item, though. Like Primus, like maybe not so much, but
Yeah.
But anyway.
Wow. So our band leader or director was a guy named Danny Frank, who used to play for CSO, Cincinnati Symphony, and the Pops. Amazing drummer.
Awesome. I remember. Sorry, keep going.
No,
So,
no.
I was
go
going to say
ahead.
that one of the best things, Mr. Frank was the most devoted teacher I think in the history of Madeira. Like I remember the only 2 times he said he missed work was when one of his kids was born. He took that day off, and then he took off a day so he could play with Pavarotti. Like the only 2 days that he missed of work ever. That dude came. He was sick. He'd be out in the rain, like lining the practice field, so we could go march on it. And just an awesome band director. And we were just telling somebody earlier this week. We had a customer bring a guitar, a guy named Rob Fetters, and Rob is legendary in Cincinnati. And he played with Adrian Belew, who's from King Crimson fame. And I was telling him about how I was nerding out because he played with the dudes in King Crimson. He talks about Rob's telling stories about like meeting and having Robert Fripp open for him and Adrian Belew on stuff, and Mr. Frank and one of our other band directors, Steve Strider, and our guidance counselor Tony Dunn.
Oh my gosh!
And those 3 guys and my friend Rick and I at I think you had already graduated by that point. I think it was our junior year talent show. Maybe it was our sophomore year. I don't remember. We came out. We opened with this King Crimson song, and when you're like 14, the only gig you get is at the variety show, or the talent show. And I just remember Mr. Frank like, "You're never going to learn this song." I'm like, "We're going to learn this song." And so Rick and I would get up early before school and we practice, and then finally the week before the talent show, he's like, "All right, you learned enough. I'll sit with you." So that's
You're like, "Oh my gosh, this guy who's
he's just frighteningly good." And we somehow convinced him it was a good idea to open the variety show with the song with 2 drummers going.
I don't know if you've seen him lately. I mean, it sounds like, that it was more of a positive impression that he gave you for music. Like, hey, like, you come in, do anything, and I'll help you kind of thing. It wasn't more of a negative feeling with Mr. Frank.
I think we had a great, at Madeira, we were really lucky that the school district was so positive. So there was so much put into the music department, where there's people I've met. You get older and you leave the bubble of suburban Cincinnati,
Yeah.
and you find these people that are like, oh, I just went to school, and if you didn't play football, nobody gave a shit about you. And in Madera, a quarter of the school was in the band. So I mean, like, doesn't get much cooler than that. That like the most popular activity is the thing that you love doing the most, which is playing music, and it's just widely regarded as like one of the most important things in the school. I'm like, it's hard to beat that, especially at a school. There's like 400 people in our high school.
Yeah,
something like that. I mean,
yeah.
like, it was tiny. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was good times.
Like being at the right place at the right time, like you can see what's happened. Like having literally a professional musician as your band director,
Yeah.
and these other guys who were amazing bass players that you had very easy access to at such an early age. I mean, you could not have asked for anything better.
The only thing that would have been better is if I could have gotten girls to talk to me. But you take the good with the bad.
Well, you made a good point. I mean, you switched from a brass instrument to the bass guitar, so that probably didn't hurt.
I mean, it's moving in the right direction.
Right direction. At least you're not. Yeah.
I mean, like the needle was pointing where we needed it to, but still good ways to go.
Yeah. Good. So, Justin, a lot of influences in your life leading to guitars, and especially the bass guitar. What got you into the fixing, the repair side of the business and building guitars? How did you transition? No, not fully transition. What brought that into your life? Yeah.
It was basically Bass Player Magazine. They had these really in-depth gear reviews every month, and they would just go to the literal nuts and bolts of how, like, what they thought was important for an instrument. And I just became obsessed with these reviews. This is the days before the internet, so you're just reading these descriptions and the way they talked about it, and you're like, oh man, I want to know, like, the fretwork is good, or they talk about the electronics being noisy, or whatever it was. And with that, like, I just got really far in depth with it, and I became obsessed with having really good equipment. And I was also really worked hard at playing, and I wanted my instruments to play really well. So I'd work on trying to tweak them and adjust them and everything like that. And it kind of, what started as an obsession with gear reviews and bass player ended up being me realizing, well, if I understand how this works and I can make the instrument play better, then I can play the instrument better. And it just became this kind of one thing leads to the next, and just snowballing effect. Pardon me. Of the instruments, of the understanding of the instruments. And that kind of transition to is out of high school, early adulthood, just being a gearhead, just buying and selling tons of basses. And then it started to turn into, well, I can maybe do some work on some of my friends' guitars. And guitar was a foreign language to me. And what ended up happening is, I guess I was about 15, and I needed some work done on a bass that was well above my pay grade. Music store here in town, it's no longer here, that's legendary amongst Cincinnati people, is Midwest Music. Said you need to go see Tom Weber. Tom Weber had a shop in Over the Rhine. I remember walking in there in the worst part of Over the Rhine's history, and the worst part of Over the Rhine, still the worst part of Over the Rhine. And this was, 25 years ago.
The non-gentrified part.
Oh, there's no gentrification happening at this part. They're level and start fresh. And I remember walking into this place where there was just stacks of guitars, and guys working on them, and I'm like, this is what I want to do. And it started there, and then it just kept building and building and building from that point of just being obsessed with magazine articles to walking into Tom Weber's shop for the first time, and then I don't know, somewhere between there and here, there's more info, but it ends up with me standing in front of piles of guitars that used to be blocks of woods.
Do you see a lot of the, from what you knew then to what you know now, you see a lot of the gear that, oh, I'm going to go spend this and I'm going to get this sound out of it, or I'm going to get this quality out of it? Or do you take the approach like, this is a good value for your dollar right now? Do you see a lot of that from then, like, or because you didn't know much, you're like, oh, I'm going to spend this much and I'll get this much better, or now you're like, hey, you don't have to spend that much, but you're going to get so much.
It's
Or do you
weird.
see that the equipment?
Pardon me. I think as a kid, I always wanted the best of the best because I was like any kid that you're just like, I want the Sony whatever, or I want the whatever brand name thing that you want. I always wanted that, whatever the highest level was.
What was that for you?
For me, as a kid, it was probably Alembic, Modulus, and Warwick basses, which were the top, literal top shelf instruments when you'd walk into Midwest. They were the most expensive. I mean, they were the Gucci and Pradas of the bass world. And as I've gotten older, I think like any adult, you start saying, well, what is a good value? There's just like this, I don't know, the time in life where you go for good value, then you get old and you're like, no, I'm actually making some money, so now I want the really expensive stuff again. So as I got older, I found myself moving more towards less expensive instruments, but nice. But now as I get older and in the shop in here, I recommend weekly for people like, this instrument's only $700, get whatever this is, as opposed to the $1,500 one, because it'll serve your purposes. And even for my own sake, as I buy gear now, I'm always looking for a better value, better bang for your buck, that maybe does the job, but it's not that super high-end name brand, whatever. But I mean, honestly, I still really like the nice stuff.
Yeah.
I'm
It
like,
looks pretty and
yeah, like I'm like,
yeah.
I'll pay for the quality. I'll pay for whatever it is I feel has
Yeah.
that value. But typically, when it comes to guitars and gear like that, like the older I get, the more I'm like, I really do look for the quality because I understand it better.
Are there any brands, and I don't know, I'll leave it up to you to call any out if you want, if not, no big deal. But are there any brands that now, with all the knowledge you have, you're like, this is a complete waste of money, they're way overcharging, or this is a sleeper brand, or everyone knows about it, and the value is, like, they could be charging twice this much for this stuff, and it's amazing with the value that they have.
The hard part now is that there isn't a lot of stuff that's bad. That's the best thing. Is
Oh, that's great.
25 years ago, when I started playing, there was tons of garbage because the technology wasn't there to mass produce an instrument cheaply and well. You had to choose: do you want it cheap or do you want it good? And now the market's almost flooded with fantastic instruments for excellent prices. When I was a kid, if you had a Squire, you felt like that was a joke of an instrument. And every week in here, I'm telling somebody, buy a Squire. Like, because you'll for $300 or $400 or whatever price point they're at, if you're just trying to cover a specific sound or a specific feel, you can get that guitar without having to spend $1,000, $1,500.
Yeah.
And they're readily available. It's not like, oh man, well, they only made X amount of this Fender model. So,
Right.
But really, the good news is there's not stuff that's bad now. That really, as I'm thinking through stuff, there's a couple of the brands that are, if you pick them up, you're like, this feels a little junky. I'm like, it probably is a little junky. But it's the stuff that you would find at like a big box store like a Walmart or stuff like that. Someplace that's not music centric,
Right.
that's going to sell a brand. And those are typically the ones you want to shy away from. But the good news is that my life's getting easier because the instruments keep getting better.
Oh, wow. That's great. So you talked about Tom Weber. He worked with Eddie Van Halen. He worked with Poison, Nine Inch Nails, Reba McEntire, The Cult, Billy Corgan, Bush, just to name a few.
Just a couple.
And he taught you. You said he taught you a lot about guitars. How did that kind of come? You went down to a shop. How did that relationship kind of form?
We forced him to make us hang out with him. I say my friend Rick and I were kind of obsessed with guitars together in high school, and I again went down to Tom's shop for some work, and then I'm like, dude, you gotta come with me, you gotta see this place. And then Rick, being like me, kind of obsessed about like nice stuff, had put a commission in for Tom to build him a guitar. And so when you're giving somebody a lot of money, you can't kick these people out. So we just forced him. Thank you, Rick, for buying that guitar from Tom. He never kicked us out of his shop. We would come down and he would show stuff, and over the years, it turned into like, show me how to do this, show me how to do. Anytime I needed something done to my bass, he would just take the time to show me. And then fast forward, I was probably out of high school. I was probably in my early 20s. He was on a break from a Van Halen tour. He had shut down his repair shop in Cincinnati, but he was going to be home for a while. I needed some work done on some guitars that was above what I could do at that time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, can I come in and can you show me some of this stuff? And he's like, yeah, we got 2 months till we go back out on the road. And basically every waking minute that I had, I was down at his shop, just learning whatever I could soak up, whether it's fretwork or putting headstocks back on guitars, anything that I could soak up. And it was great. At that point, I was more than a decade in of him not kicking me out of his shop.
Yeah.
It was pretty great.
So like one step away from literally having a cot in his shop and sleeping in his shop, pretty much.
I would have if he would have let me, and if my ex-wife wouldn't have divorced me at the time, which hindsight probably should have had the cot at Tom's shop anyway.
You also, I also read that you, Matt Friedman,
Matt
had some influence on your career.
Matt is one of the finest human beings in existence. Another guy who, this time I paid him to build a bass, and I would call and I would just almost on a daily basis talk his ear off about something. And he never told me to stop calling. He would, sometimes, I'm sure like we do in here now, he couldn't answer the phone because he was busy doing stuff.
Yeah.
But he showed me that one of the best things ever is I was going to go to a Luthier school in Arizona, great Luthier school, Roberto Venn, and I was talking to Matt, and he's like, how much is this going to cost? I'm like, it's going to cost at the time about $11,000.
Yeah.
And one of the single best pieces of advice anybody's ever given me, he says, just buy $11,000 in tools. And I'm like, that's great. I don't know how to use them. And that turned into him. He was at the time getting ready to wrap up production of his instruments at Acacia. And he's like, well, I have a couple instruments. If you want, I can sell them to you at a very reduced rate. I'll show you. If you want to come out, we'll spend a couple days, and then I'll show you how to do stuff. You can go home, do stuff. Then you come back, we'll do the same thing repeatedly. And it turned into like master classes of Luthery stuff. And I still have, I remember on one of my last trips out, I had written down a notebook filled with questions. And I left 2 questions on each page.
Right.
And I was probably, 60 questions. And I remember sitting in his living room, and it was snowing outside. And I'm going through all these questions with him, and his wife, Dorothy, she's like, I never thought I'd hear anybody that one cared about these things, and I never thought I'd hear him, Matt, telling anybody these things, because so much of Luthery stuff prior to YouTube and the internet was just secret society type stuff. Yeah. And so for Matt to show me and tell me and walk me through his thought processes and his things that he did on his instruments it really was a master class in how to make a world-class instrument and how to do it at a level that I still struggle to find anybody that built a better bass than Matt Friedman when he was building instruments. Just a real genius dude. And I feel bad because I still have his fret slotting jig and a bunch of his tools, and I don't think he's going to be building any instruments until I give those back. So
you may get a knock on your door someday.
I will happily return them. So they have been very useful, and I'm very honored that he let me use them. So,
what would you say? What advice? So now you talked about YouTube, right? I mean, it opens so many doors for so many people, whatever they want to do. And what would you say to someone nowadays if they wanted to kind of follow what you're doing, and they don't have that Matt Friedman in their life? Is there enough good stuff on YouTube to kind of really kick them off, or do you like, hey, you really need someone to kind of watch you, and you really need to get your hands dirty with someone who can kind of shadow you?
I think it could go 2 ways. Point in case, or my assistant Tiernan, who's sitting in here with us, he went to Luthery school at Guitarcraft Academy at Musicians Institute in Nashville. And when he started, it was like, shit. I had this moment of like, I should have just gone to Luthery school. Matt was wrong. Because he walked in here with like 5 years of skill set that took me to develop. And just kicking ass. But at the same time, not everybody can go to Luthery school. Not everybody can can devote that kind of time, energy, and money to it. And I would be lying if I said that almost on a weekly basis, I'm on YouTube looking for some aspect of some repair that somebody has done previously. Just give me some information, something to kind of pull from, that maybe the repair I'm working on isn't the exact same thing, or the build that I'm doing isn't the exact same thing, but there's enough information you can glean from somebody off of that. So in a perfect world, everybody should go to Luthier school and we all leave with a skill set that's really awesome. But in the real world, you can pull a lot of really good information off YouTube. I've also seen a lot of very bad information on YouTube, and that's the hard part, though. So it's finding what's good, what's bad, and there seems to be an equal amount of both. So, just tread lightly, try it, and if you fail, make sure you find some other videos that people...
Or contact Justin, and he'll let you know which ones to avoid.
Yeah, there's that too.
So now we're in your business. We are living, breathing. We're sitting in your business right now. What gave you the drive to finally step out on your own and start your business? And what year was that? And how did it come to where it is today?
Yes, the first time I had business cards printed, like with my name on it saying I fix guitars, was 2007 or 2008. And what really did is I liked doing it. It was just fun. It was relaxing. I was managing a restaurant at the time, and it was, who in the history of restaurants, well, now I guess it's different, who in the history of shitty restaurants has left work saying, man, I love that, working in that restaurant. And
count them on this hand right here.
Yeah, exactly. So that being said, like it was really an escape for me.
Yeah.
And so I think 2007, 2008, I made that jump to kind of like, I'm going to actually do this for hire and charge people. The financial crisis hit in 2008, and the restaurant I was working at, our sales dropped a little bit, like everybody's did.
Yeah.
And my boss at the time was basically like, the managers are all going to have to do some cook shifts and yada, yada, yada. And I had no interest in doing that. And I said, why don't I just take an extra day off each week and I'll commit it to doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And over the course of about 2 years, I was able to transition from this being a part-time thing to it being my sole source of income.
Wow.
With no loss of guaranteed income. If money got tight, I could pick up some extra shifts, or luckily it didn't happen much, but it was nice to transition out of that. So that's kind of how it kind of got to this point, if that.
So now we're here, May 2021. And you hear all about all these businesses, you talked about restaurants, and people have been struggling in restaurants, and all these other businesses going out, but other businesses like excelling just because everyone's at home and all that stuff. Where does your business kind of play in it? I mean, are people at home like, oh, bass guitar, I think I can pick this up, and now you're busier than ever? Or
From May of 2020 till May of 2021 has been the largest expansion of volume of our business that I've had ever. Frighteningly so. Especially considering going into 2020, February 2020 was the biggest month we ever had. March 2020 was only normal because we had so much stuff we couldn't get done in February. By the last 2 weeks in March, we had 8 guitars come in of 2020, and that was very frightening.
Wow.
To go from having 50 guitars a week to 8 in 2. So,
wow.
Yeah. So then we, like everybody else, we shut down in April. I was talking to another Luthier friend of mine up in Northern Ohio, and he's like, actually, you qualify as audio video repair, so you can open. You're deemed essential. I'm like, all right,
Thank you, Mike DeWine.
Yeah, I'm like, we're going to roll this until they tell me not to. And so when we reopened in May, it kind of almost just like the floodgates opened. We saw so much work come in that by the end of June, we were exceeding what we had done the previous year by a huge margin.
Yeah.
We got to the point where I think it was August. I think we took a week off just because we just need to get caught up. Just stop taking stuff in for a while. And by the end of the year, we had taken a couple of weeks off for holidays, like stuff that we would do in a normal year. We had basically the entire month of April shut down. So I think we did the math. We'd been closed down for essentially 2 months of 2020, and we still did more than 33% more than we'd ever done in a year previous to that.
From what I hear, it seems like it's a combination. Thank you, COVID.
Yeah,
You know, for that, but also the quality in your name is just. I mean, I would not be here today unless my brother-in-law said, "Hey, did you know a guy named Justin?" I'm like, yeah, I went to high school with him. Your name has gotten out there enough that he knows about you guys, and I think it seems like it's the quality of the work that you guys do. Your name, your reputation's out there, and COVID. It's this combination of everything that's just like.
It's a perfect storm of exciting things for us.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to people hearing about us, like we do zero advertising. The only advertising we do is people talking about us. I'm not on Facebook. Like we have a Facebook page, but I'm not like, hey, bring your guitar to me. You know, everything that we do is 100% organic, and it stems from, as much as I made fun of the restaurant, it stems from the customer service aspect of being in a restaurant, of making sure people are happy and making sure that you're not doing work for you, you're doing work for them, is always at the forefront of everything that you do. Because again, we're group, half of us in here are bass players.
Right.
So like, we don't know what we're doing on guitars. So we better sure as shit figure out what that person wants on their guitar and then make it happen. And it just comes from that deciphering of understanding what they want, and even if they can't exactly tell you, figuring out, reading between the lines. Yeah. And when you can do that and you can make people happy, and you have a pandemic that keeps everybody at home playing music, you can see some pretty big growths in business.
So any of you guys that are watching at home, actually that want to do something like Justin, work hard. You know, you don't need to do the advertising. Just work your butt off, learn the skills, and play the long game.
Yeah.
You know, if you're in it for the quick buck, yeah, you can market and all that stuff. But if you want to get to a level that Justin's at, it's going to take a while. And have the patience for it to take that while, because it'll naturally happen.
And don't be afraid of living in poverty, because you will.
It gets better?
No.
Okay.
No. Like, what happens is you make money and then you buy more tools. And then you're like, oh, where'd all that money go? And like, oh, it's in these toolboxes or in a crazy machine or whatever. It was funny talking about Tom Weber.
Yeah.
Him and I had a discussion at Christmas time last year. We were talking, and I said something about how we were just, the discussion got to actually making money at this job and how you don't.
Yeah.
And it's like being a monk. You take a vow of poverty, but you do something you love.
Yeah.
And as much as I'm saying I'm not making money, like, we make enough to get by, for sure. Like, I mean, I'd be leading you askew if I said that we weren't actively making some good profits in here. But at the same time, you can't gouge people. If you're in this to make money, you're doing it for the wrong reason in the first place, because you're never going to get rich doing this. So you better love it. And as long as you love it and you are genuinely excited about the joy that you bring somebody's life by doing this work, those rewards pay off in other ways that money simply can't give you, which sounds awful because money can buy a lot of cool stuff.
But who's happier right now? You doing what you do, or Bill Gates?
Definitely Bill Gates.
I don't know.
I mean, he's going through a divorce, so maybe not. But but no.
But that's a perfect point. You said maybe not. So you're even questioning, like, all the money in the world may not make you as happy as Justin.
Exactly. And the one thing that I can say, even when this job sucks, even when it's frustrating, this week we've been so busy, I have not left any night before. I usually am here by 8:45. I haven't left any night before 7 o'clock. A couple of nights we're closer to 9, 10 o'clock. It's you do it because you love it.
Yeah.
And the most important thing, and for me it really does kind of, it always used to, it's still about fixing guitars, but it's about making sure the people you're doing the work for are happy and they get what they want. And that really is, and I feel, I don't talk about this much, but I feel really proud to have that, and to have guys like Tiernan who work for me, Tiernan and Joe and Andy and Nick, and everybody wants to do the best they can, and to see how happy it makes people and how excited people are to talk about us because we made them so happy is just awesome.
I mean, you're at like the business, like the crossroads of doing what you love, making money from it, and other people around you that you work with or work for the business or come in as customers. Everyone's enjoying it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you're like in this nirvana kind of.
It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
we actually talk.
Not easy to find.
In a typical workday in here, if you walk in, the TV will have probably either It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Family Guy, The Simpsons, The Big Lebowski, some sort of comedy on. Because and I think we've said it. Tiernan and I say it when we talk about building instruments is when you're in a good mood, that good mood and that vibe passes along to the instruments that you make. It passes along to the instruments that you work on. It really does like affect the whole general vibe of the work. And I think that this is going to sound very hippie-ish, but like if you're constantly pouring positivity and happiness into something that you already love, it's just going to perpetuate itself to do good things down the line. And for us, that's one of the things I think that we hold really dear here is that everybody enjoys what they're doing. Everybody's here because they want to be here, and we have fun doing it. And it's self-rewarding, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like I get paid to do this. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. So you've worked on guitars for, let's name a few. We're going to name drop a little bit here, folks. Walk the Moon.
Tons of Walk the Moon guitars.
Fleet Foxes, Humphreys McGee, Freak Bass, For Today, Taproot, Smile Empty Soul, Public, The Griswolds, and members of Bootsy Collins, our local Bootsy Collins here.
We've
Rubber
actually
Band.
worked on Bootsy's basses.
There
now,
you
too.
go.
It's official.
And a little slight change, Megan Trainor's band too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how's it working with celebrity musicians, Bootsy being one of them, or any different than the general public? Or is it somewhat of a signpost in your career, or just kind of like you see it as just another gig?
The cool thing is that when everybody talks to me about guitars, they're just somebody who has a relationship with an instrument. And they can be super famous, they can be just starting out, but all these people have a relationship with their instrument that they care about enough to bring it to me or to have us do service on them, even if they didn't bring it in. If somebody, like, there's some people who their assistants bring me guitars and stuff like that. And it's kind of like Elvis said, everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. He puts it so. So at the end of the day, you're just talking to people who are musicians, and if you get starstruck with people too much, you don't do your best work. I won't lie, I work extra hard on stuff, like not extra hard, but like Bootsy's bass is in here with a problem a couple weeks ago, and it was a very serious, like somebody really screwed something up problem, and if I screw this up, I'm like, this dude is like on the Mount Rushmore of bass players, and like I feel like I would be letting the team down if I screw something up. And it's not that you work extra hard for them, but like you know that these people are professional musicians, and there's not a whole lot different between them at least when they're talking to me. There's not a whole lot different between them and somebody else who's playing covers 4 nights a week at bars in Cincinnati. They're all professionals that need these tools to work for their job, and yeah, you get starstruck. They might leave you with, "That's fucking sweet." But like you do the happy dance, but then the work still has to get done and it has to be correct.
Is it kind of like they come in, you're like, this is kind of like the icing on the cake. I get to eat my cake, and here's all this icing that comes with it, like all the fun stuff. You get, this is awesome.
I think one of the ones that really sticks out in my brain is Ryan Stasek from Humphreys McGee. They were playing shows here in town, and one of the guys that works for us was in a side project with Ryan for a while. And he's like, Ryan's having some problems with his bass. They're doing a 2-night stand. Can he just come up Saturday? I'm like, yeah, come on up. We'll bring Ryan. And right about where we're sitting, Ryan's just sitting here playing bass. And I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I did shows with Walk the Moon at Red Rocks, and I'm like, there's a picture of you, this dude sitting right here next to the catering room at Red Rocks, where everybody walks in and out. Like, this dude is the focal point of one of the for the artists anyway, one of the most important parts of one of the most important amphitheaters in the world, and he's sitting here in the shop, and at that moment, he's just a guy who we're both excited to talk about basses. And then he leaves, and I'm like, that dude is on the wall at Red Rocks by catering.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool to have that experience that you do that happy dance, and you have to separate yourself from it, because if you don't, you just don't do, you get focused on one thing instead of the work. So.
Yeah. So you were the guitar tech for Walk the Moon, Jackson Browne, the National. How was it, like, I remember looking on Facebook, like, Justin's in Japan, or he's in Paris, like, or wherever you were, and it's like, how was it touring the world with a band?
Well, it helps that, in Walk the Moon particularly, because I have done more work for them than anybody else.
Yeah.
I kind of got sucked into that gig because I'm friends with them.
Yeah.
Where it was literally like, hey, we have a budget for a guitar tech now. Do you want to come do it? And I think it was a couple of years ago, somebody said Justin's working his 3rd annual Last Walk the Moon gig. And now I've got 2 Walk the Moon gigs scheduled for this summer.
Awesome.
Working for those guys is one of the absolute best experiences in the world, because they're all the guys in the crew and in the band are guys who I consider friends. Even guys who aren't on the crew and may have parted ways with the band are all good guys. So you literally get to travel the world with a group of guys who you value as friends, who you think are good people. There's nobody that they employ that's not a good person. It's like a traveling show of just you and people that you love going to see the world. And it's just a great experience. I can't say enough great things about it. I could probably go into more detail, but I don't want to get anybody in trouble.
That's what non-disclosure agreements are for.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's the thing, is that everybody's so like everybody has this rock star image of like, you go out, you're just gonna party all the time and everything like that, and you're like, actually, we're gonna meet in the bar for one drink, then we're gonna go get dinner and be full, and we're gonna go back to our rooms and fall asleep.
Yeah, you guys that are watching out here, try to travel for more than 3 or 4 weeks on the road without coming home, and tell me if you're still partying like rock stars.
Yeah.
I've been on the road once for 6 weeks. All you want to do is sleep in your own bed one night.
Yeah,
That's it.
Nothing is more exciting, and I'm saying this is as much dripping sarcasm as I can add to it. Nothing is more exciting than sharing a stink tube that travels from city to city with 10 of your best friends.
Stink tube. Hashtag stink tube. There you go. So it's interesting to see that, Walking Moon you've done a lot of work with him, but then also someone like Jackson Browne. How is it working on the road with someone like, Walk the Moon, who's a newer band, versus someone like Jackson Browne that's a little bit older?
In fairness, the Jackson Browne stuff was like, I've done a couple like little hired hand sort of stuff where you just fill in.
Yeah, but still, you can probably see a difference between the way that they run.
Everybody's different, like whether it's Jackson Browne and Walk the Moon or the band I was in for a long time. Every group of musicians has their own idiosyncrasies that they bring to the table. So some guys are like, hey, I want this stuff this particular way. Some guys, one of the interesting things I thought with Jackson Browne was he's like every night after the show I pack my own gear up for 50 years. Or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, he's just like, I want to pack at least a guitar up, because he's like, it transitions that the gig shut down, and this is, now you move into the next part of the thing. Yeah. I thought that was super cool. It might have just been because he didn't want me to not pack something in. I don't know, but.
Yeah. Well, they're very particular sometimes about their own equipment, and, and trust, like, if I pack it exactly, I'm the only one to blame if it doesn't show up how I want it.
There's definitely that, because I know I've gotten plenty of blame for packing things wrong in certain gigs. So
probably some of it warrants it, right?
Totally, 100%.
Just now we see you have your own guitar line.
Yes.
I mean, it's a big move. You've always worked on other people's other brands, and you've bought other brands. Now you have your own. Can you tell me a little bit about your own guitar line? why did you start it, and where's it at now?
Well, it started as kind of this natural progression.
And bridge builder guitar.
Yeah, bridge builder guitars.
Yeah.
It started as kind of a natural progression of you work on so many guitars for so long, you start seeing what works, what doesn't, what you like, what you don't. And for me, it was just one of those things where I'm like, I stopped playing music, like playing in bands, with kind of the things. From my point, at that point in time, I was like, I've reached the end of my expiration date in terms of what record companies are willing to throw money at. So I'm like, so what do I want to do creatively now? And this to me was just the natural progression.
Sure.
It's one of those things that I look at all these things as they're morphing from fetal instruments to finished instruments. And
awesome.
I'm very, very proud of what they've started to become. There's not many of them. That's intentional. I kind of say that, like, because I built a couple, and one of my friends is like, "You're going to sell like 1,000 of those." I'm like, "No. Ferrari's not worried about taking any of Kia's market share."
Right.
The cool thing, and I really, when you talk about how I viewed stuff as a kid, I look at these and I'm like, these are the instruments that I would have wanted. I would have just obsessed over when I was a kid. And you take all the lessons from being a 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid that's like just enamored with these instruments, and then you apply 15 years of working on them and the things that you see that work, that don't work, and applying the things you do want to them. And I feel like a lot of these have taken on a real life that's even better than I thought they'd be, which is pretty sweet, which sounds, I feel very arrogant and egotistical when I talk about these, but I'm really proud of them because they kick ass. They do everything I want them to do. They sound great. They play great.
Yeah.
They're built like tanks. And I'm real excited about them.
That's awesome. I mean, just talking to you, I could see the passion like oozing out of you. Like, oh, these are my babies.
Might also be meat sweats.
Justin did eat a epic meat bar before our interview today. So Epic, if you're watching and you want to,
the Sriracha Chicken. The shop is powered by Sriracha Chicken Epic bars.
There you go. Bridge Builder sponsored maybe by Epic bars. Now you have all these things. Are you still doing any bands? It sounds like you're not. Really
No.
doing any bands,
I play router table and bandsaw.
Okay, there you go.
Those are my main instruments of choice these days.
So you have the business. You'll some gigs coming up with Walk the Moon this summer. You have a wife now.
Yes. Well, she has me.
She has you.
I definitely do not have her.
Yes, I understand. And how do you balance all of it? Working these long hours, you must have a very understanding wife.
Very much so. She's the best woman in the whole world.
How do you? Oh, besides my wife, right?
They're all on the podium.
Yes. Well, I used his words earlier. The Mount Rushmore of wives.
Yes.
How do you balance all that with that work and?
It took a really long time. When I met my now wife, it was nice that she's from Australia. At the time we were about, I think, 11 or 12 hours off time-wise, something like that. So me working from 10 a.m. till midnight and then talking to her on my way home was her leaving for work in the morning.
Wow.
And then I'd talk to her on her lunch break, before I went to bed at 2 or 3 or whatever it was. Very much musician schedule, night owl, workaholic thing. When she moved over and we got married, it was a real wake-up call that you can't spend 65, 70 hours a week working and have a healthy relationship with another adult. So it took, I would say, years, and it's still a work in progress, to have a good work and life balance. Something just as simple as turning off the notifications on your email on your phone, not answering your phone if you don't recognize the number, stuff like that, and just when you get home, you just shut it down. And it's still tough. Like right now, we're so busy that like I said, every night this week I've been here. I've probably, as we're talking about this, I've been physically in this building for probably pushing 65, 70 hours this week. It's a ludicrous amount of time to be here. That's the exception to the rule now. That
Right.
used to be the standard.
Yeah.
But it's just forcing yourself to have that work-life balance. And the hard part, and I think this is why she's so great, because she accepts it, is that it never really shuts off. You can shut off parts of the job, but when we're sitting at home and we're watching something on TV that we're not really paying attention to, it's just me looking for wood. Like on eBay.
Justin's got wood, guys.
Yeah, I mean, like, I've a lot of wood. And that's not like, like, it's just not something that shuts down. There's always, like, if we're at, out shopping, I'll be like, oh, wait, I can use this, like, random weird thing at a Walmart for use on a guitar that might help reduce, this, I can get these here, and this will help keep electrical interference from going into the insides of this,
Right.
or whatever the thing is. It never shuts down. So she accepts me for me, and I do my best to make sure that I shut down this place as much as I can when I leave. But my brain is, I'd be wrong if I said that I ever stop thinking about this. It's always, these things are always in the forefront of my brain. In terms of trying to figure out what I like, what I want to do, what can I do better with them, so.
It's that I've been a business owner, and it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every waking moment, you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
But it's probably even accelerated because you're so, and like my business, like, it was nice, but I was not passionate like you are. Like it is the food for your soul.
Yes. And it's speaking of being food for something and how it applies to me. I've told my wife when I die, I want to have one of two things happen, and they're both very similar. But the end result is that I just want my ashes or body to be thrown in a pit and as many maple seeds thrown on top of me as possible, so that eventually I can grow into maple trees that they can then cut down and turn into guitar necks.
Who was this reincarnated?
Yeah, exactly.
That'd
Exactly.
be awesome.
I feel, but at my luck, I would just come back just to mess with some luthier in the future. Like, I'll show you twisted wood.
Oh man. So talking about wood, what's your favorite instrument? Favorite bass to play? Now, like, yes, you're not actively in a band, but what is your one, like, if you just sat home and you had free time, you're like, I just want to sit back and this is what would want to play right now.
There's a couple.
Okay.
First and foremost,
Obviously, bridge builder guitar.
well, it's funny. It's funny. I've only built one bass, and I was super happy with it when it was done. But it's not a bass, the type of bass that I would play for myself or build for myself, which is perfect. Because somebody said to me once, like, what is it? The adage is you'd never sell the drugs that you take. So that's why I don't build basses. Because I would just never sell any of them.
Oh my god.
I would just have a room full of basses in my house, and my wife's like, you don't even play. But my personal instruments I like, I have an acacia bass that Matt Friedman built for me that will be pried out of my cold dead hands one day. Chris Benavente in Oregon builds a fantastic bass. I have one of his fretless is also going to be pried from my other one bass and the other. And then I'll probably be holding a bass that my friend Sean May up in Michigan, May Custom Basses, Maybase77 on Instagram. He doesn't charge enough. I'm saying this now so I can pressure him publicly to start charging more. And until he does, go order basses from Sean. There we go.
Thanks, Justin. Now the price has just doubled. He's like, thank
trust
you,
me,
Justin.
I've been having this conversation with Sean for half a decade. He should have raised his prices then. He still hasn't. He's maybe raised them a little bit. But Sean May makes an incredible bass. Those three guys are probably the ones I'll love and cherish forever. There's another guy named Ray Roger, who I think he's in Syracuse now. I'm not sure if he's building anymore. I think he shut down, and I think he's waiting to restart. I've had several of Ray's basses. I sold one to a friend of mine and bought it back from him. And over the years, I used to buy and sell basses to flip. I've probably owned close to 400 instruments. I have purchased back 3, and one of them being this bass that Ray built, and I just absolutely love it. So those are probably the 4: the Acacia, the Benavente, the May bass, and the Roger bass. So
Awesome.
yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah, okay. You'll find him in his ashes. Because
Oh no.
cold dead hands.
Those are too. They'll be my cold dead hands. They're not gonna get.
Well,
those
when
are
they're
too
cold,
good.
when Justin is cold and dead, then you can
Take
have
them.
those. Then you have those.
Put them to good use somewhere. I'm not taking. I don't want to be buried with them. That's a waste of a good bass.
Yes. So we're gonna wrap up here. Where does Justin J. Kennedy Guitars go from here? Where does Bridge Builder go? And where do you see yourself going professionally in this business?
The good news is I've painted myself into a corner, so I'm definitely not going to stop. Prison of my own making. So the next big thing we're working on now is we're working on financing currently to purchase a Plek machine, which is it's frightening when you're talking about a machine the size of a phone booth that costs more than my first house.
Yeah.
That's the big thing here, to do more automated, again, more precise stuff. With the Bridge Builder stuff, I look at these and I've kind of learned through where we're at right now that I'd like building in batches. I'd probably be content if I only built 15 instruments a year and just capped it out at that. Again, I try to build Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bugattis, but Bugatti's not worried about Honda, Ferrari's not worried about Kia. So I just want to continue to make instruments that I really, really think exceed in the highest quality possible.
Now, when you're building your stuff, are you like, oh, if you're building the Bugattis, the Lamborghinis, the Ferraris, are you charging those prices, or do you think you're very fair or like your friend not charging enough?
I like to think that I'm fair. The one thing that we have in this shop working for us is that we're in Cincinnati. We don't have to charge New York or LA prices. Again, going back to the pricing on how we do stuff here, and we joke about not making any money, but the truth is if you charge fair prices, you're not gouging anybody, you're not undercharging, you're not overcharging, but you're finding that appropriate fee for whatever skill set that you're bringing, or whatever job that you're bringing to somebody. You typically end up leaving feeling like you did pretty good. They feel like they did pretty good on it. That being said, I would hold some of my guitars, especially, to the same level as guys charging twice as much. And in a blindfolded test, where name brands didn't matter, I like to think that I would exceed a lot of them. But you don't want to charge 5 figures for an instrument when, hey, I really feel like half that is a fair price.
Yeah.
Or whatever, a third of that. So again, it just comes down to being fair with people. But again, you got to do something. You got to make a living.
Yeah. So the next things are getting this awesome machine,
The Plek machine.
the Plek, and it sounds like you're just really happy just kind of where you're at right now, or are there other visions for the future? Like, I'm just happy doing where I'm at right now.
We need to find a bigger space.
We talked about that earlier,
That's one of the big things for us.
Yeah, if you guys saw around the shop, and maybe you will here, it is packed. We had 6, 7 people in here earlier, and you could not move around. So it's a good problem to have.
It's a great problem, and we've been in this location now for just under 4 years. And when we moved here from the old shop was half the size of this place. So we're just keep doubling every couple of years.
Awesome.
It's a great problem to have. That would be the next big thing. We've talked about potentially adding another guy on staff to just help us. The volume of guitars, you don't want to have somebody's instrument for too long. And the only way you can get it done faster is to have more hands on deck.
Yeah.
So that's probably the next thing, is a bigger space, one more guy, maybe some automation with the Plek machine. But
cool.
We'll see. I mean, for right now, it's just let's see how many frets we can put in and headstocks we can glue back on.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up there, guys. I want to thank Justin at J. Kennedy Guitars here today, Bridge Builder Guitars, and you guys check him out. Just look it up, Google it. He doesn't market, so word of mouth.
JKennedyGuitars.com.
There you go. JKennedyGuitars.com in Cincinnati. And anything else you want to say, Justin, before we wrap up?
Instagram's always a great place when we have time to post. Bridge Builder Guitars, J. Kennedy Guitar Repair. We have lots of photos on there, and also make sure you check out my assistant Tiernan on there. Also, Grog Guitars. He builds some crazy stuff as well. There's probably links to end if you follow us on Instagram for everybody in the shop that's got their social media stuff. We all work collectively together, but we also do a lot of stuff independent. So I can't say enough great things about all the guys that work for us in here. So
Yeah, and if you guys are at a Walk the Moon concert coming up, you may
If you-
see
if you see
Justin on the side.
if you see a fat guy handing Eli a guitar, it's probably me.
There you go. Well, thanks guys for checking us out, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.